When I was a kid, my folks had a car called the Hillman Avenger. This is not that car. This is the Jeep Avenger. But it's still more of a family runabout like the Hillman Avenger than a pure off-road specialist. It's also the first all-electric Jeep to arrive on the market. We got to try it out at the UK launch, so here are our first impressions. Before we get to the details though, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So Jeep has kept the typical brand qualities with the Avenger. You've got this characteristic grille that's got the kind of bent bit. Now this obviously isn't an air intake anymore because this is an electric car. This is actually more for aero purposes now. Now, you got this rugged plastic all the way around. It goes all the way across the wheel arches and then down the bottom. And one of the things that Jeep wanted to particularly point out about this is it's a plastic that is the same colour all the way through. It's not coloured in any way on the top. So if you scratch it, you can actually get away with that because it will be the same colour underneath. So this car is the first step in Jeep's strategy to have 4 electric models by 2025 and to go all electric by 2030. So this car is based on the Stellantis ECMP2 platform. That is the same platform as, or an upgraded version of the same platform that the things like the Corsa E, the Peugeot E208 was based on. This is a slightly enhanced version now, that's why it's version 2. It has 156 horsepower instead of what used to be 136 and a 54 kilowatt hour battery. There will be 3 trim levels called Longitude, Altitude and Summit. Presumably, you'll need the top model if you want to get to the top of a mountain. Even the base model has a 10.25-inch infotainment screen, plenty of safety tech and 16-inch wheels. The Altitude upgrades to 17-inch wheels and adaptive cruise control. Summit gets you 18-inch wheels alongside LED headlights, tail lights and fog lamps, plus automatically folding door mirrors with puddle lights. The rear parking camera comes with front, rear and side sensors. That sense of ruggedness continues inside, so let's take a look. This is quite a conventional interior, but it's intended to be very durable and rugged. You'll notice there's a lot of use of plastic, but it feels like quite high quality plastic. You can wipe that down, keep it clean. The materials used for the seats, similarly intended to be very durable. This is a top of the range Summit. It's not leather, but you can imagine that this is going to be perfectly fine if you get in having got out the beach or something and you're a bit wet. Lots of buttons, all very conventional, buttons for the air conditioning, and loads and loads of interior space. So Jeep wants to emphasize just how much storage space you have inside. You have this really big cubby here. There's a wireless charging point for your phone in this particular one because this is the top of the range where you don't get that with the other 2 trim levels. So you've got this cubby here for drinks. You can see a couple of cans in there. These are movable partitions. Apparently you could put a 1.5 litre bottle in the front one. There's another cubby here, small one, if you want to put things in there. Jeep wanted to point out that the amount of interior space, including door pockets and the glove compartment, is 34 litres, when most cars have less than 15 litres. So, if you do want to put things like physical maps, even if you're going hiking with this car, there's plenty of space to put all that stuff in here. One thing you don't get with this car is any kind of electronic adjustment for the seats. This is the top of the range model, and you still have mechanical seat adjustments. So when you get in the back of this car, you realise that this car is only slightly longer than 4 metres because the amount of space, there's plenty of headroom because this is an SUV. The knee room's a little bit limited. I've obviously been driving this car. I'm only 5'10", and my knees are a little bit stuck here. Now the middle seat is also probably only good for a smaller kid. Wouldn't want to have them there for too long, and there isn't actually anything underneath here, so there's no kind of armrest in the middle seat either. Rear passengers do have a single USB-C port with this top trim level, but what you'll notice there aren't any air conditioning ports here, there's no control over air conditioning in the back, so if your rear passengers need a bit of air, they're going to have to open a window. But rear seat passengers do benefit from seat back pockets, so your kids can keep their copies of Off-Roaders Weekly or whatever it is kids read these days. The 2 outer rear seats have ISOFIX points for adding child car seats. So as is a family car, you'd hope it has a decent amount of boot space. And one really nice thing about this is you have this electric boot release. You just have to kick and it opens. That's only available on the Altitude trim and above. Now the boot space is 355 litres, which is kind of more hatchback territory than SUV territory. And there's a little bit of extra space under here for you to put your cables in. And you have this cover to remove. And if you drop these rear seats down, it's quite easy to do. You can see I'm not having to struggle too much with that. So this goes down and you get 1,053 litres. And I put that in perspective, you actually get a couple of hundred more litres from something like a Volkswagen ID3, so it's not absolutely huge. One benefit though is that this is a properly solid and robust plastic lip. So if you put something in here, it won't actually damage your boot. You can also get a cover for this, which is washable, a kind of rubber cover. So if you put a bike that's dirty because you've been trail biking, that's going to work reasonably well. So this is kind of more shopping and the possibly an overnight or weekend trip rather than a long family holiday kind of boot size. Another thing to mention is that this car doesn't tow. It's not rated to be able to tow, and you can't get a towing a hook as an optional extra, which is a bit of an unusual thing for a car that has some outdoor cross-country credentials like this does. So with 54 kilowatt hours of battery space and just 51 of that actually usable, this car only has 249 miles of range, and that's in eco mode, which from my experience, you probably don't want to drive in that mode too much. You lose maybe 10 or 15 miles in normal mode. So this car does support DC charging up to 100 kilowatts, which means you can go from 20 to 80% in 24 minutes. On a 7 kilowatt AC home wallbox, it will take about 8 hours to go from 0 to full. We would have liked a little bit more range out of this car, although 249 miles is an improvement over previous Stellantis cars. You want a bit more because you're going off the beaten road, you're going to maybe go into a woodland, so maybe you're not going to always be so close to a charger, but you can go long distance. I was getting somewhere between 3 and 4 miles per kilowatt hour, which is decent enough, so you're probably going to be seeing maybe 150 to 200 miles of real range. I was doing all kinds of driving and probably not really saving my right foot, so it's not too bad. So as I said before, this is a fairly conventional interior. You've got a pretty conventional steering wheel. You've got on the left, you've got the cruise controls. And as I said, cruise control is standard on all vehicles and adaptive on the middle trim level and above. And on the right, you've got the multimedia controls. You've got a typical stalk for lights and indicators on the left, and for the windscreen wipers, so you're listening Tesla, on the right. Then if we look in the central console, we've got plenty of actual buttons. You know, Jeep wants this to be a car that you can use without thinking about it. So there's no kind of like, oh, I've got to go to the LCD panel. You've got a full set of controls for the air conditioning. These are the controls for park, reverse, neutral, drive, and B mode. One thing that is missing is auto hold, which is slightly annoying. There's a couple of buttons here in the central console. That's the parking brake, which you would have to use to stop at traffic lights because of the lack of an auto hold. And then the drive modes. So there are 3 drive modes, Eco, Normal and Sport, and then 3 off-road modes that I'll talk about later. So if you want to turn this on, there is actually a full start-stop button. If you don't have your foot on the brake, it'll just turn on the infotainment. So I'm going to put my foot on the brake and then hit that, and it'll turn everything on properly. So you've got 2 10.25-inch screens on this car. This one on the right is for your instrument panel. You've got the power mode, whether you're charging, powering, or kind of coasting on the left. You've got a variable display in the middle for ADAS, and then you've got the battery level on the right. The other 10.25-inch screen is this central infotainment screen, and you've got, you can scroll through it. You've got the sat nav there, which is decent enough. You can put waypoints in there as well. You've got the radio. You click through there, you can go through and look at the statistics for your charging there and power usage. Button there to go back to home. Various applications that you can add, ADAS, and maybe not the most intuitive way of going back all the way. Again, another way of looking at the energy there, home back there. That button gets you to various functions and statistics for the car. Lots of different settings, connectivity. Not a bad little screen in terms of kind of the way it looks and kind of nice big icons. As I said, there is software control of the climate, but you don't necessarily need that because you've got all the buttons underneath. You can attach a phone. This car supports CarPlay and Android Auto, so if you wanted to use your phone for sat nav and music, that's pretty easy to do. So this car in all its forms has 156 horsepower, which is not a lot in EV form, and it takes a rather leisurely 9.6 seconds to hit 60 miles per hour. Now that is also with the sport mode engaged. If you're in normal or eco, it's a lot slower. It is worth noting there is a dual motor version of this car due next year, which should be a lot faster, but we don't have any details of that just yet. Despite its off-road appearance, this car is likely to spend most of its time on tarmac roads, and dynamically it's not too bad. It is quite high up and there's a fair bit of body roll, but if you stick it in sport mode, it's quite sprightly. Certainly during my driving testing, I've been able to overtake a few things and get a decent amount of performance out of this car. It's not a hot hatch, but if you want to get from A to B relatively quickly and get past some slow moving traffic on an A road, it's perfectly capable of that. However, what is unusual about this car is that it also has some off-road modes. It has sand, mud and snow modes. Now, we were given a demonstration of the snow mode going over some very, very steep bumps created with metal frames, and that showed that this car could sense when one of the wheels was definitely just spinning aimlessly and put all the power into the wheel that did have some traction, so it could actually get across those kinds of terrain, which is really unusual for a two-wheel drive car. Usually you only expect that kind of thing in a four-wheel drive car. Now, usually you will drive this car in normal mode, and it's perfectly adequate in that mode for everyday A-road driving or sitting on a highway at 70 miles an hour. The suspension is fairly soft, which means that the kind of bumps that you would get, you're more likely to encounter these now if you're around town, and there are a couple from in this rural part of the UK that we're driving through here. And actually, a lot of people probably will want to have a car that has the capability of going over bad terrain for urban environments, because urban roads are so bad these days. Jeep also wants to stress some actual figures about this car's off-road abilities. It has a 20-degree approach mode, which means it can hit a bump that's at 20 degrees angle from the ground. It has a 20-degree breakover mode, which means that it can go over a bump that is 20 degrees. It has 200 millimeters of clearance for that as well. And then the mode for when you're leaving a bump is 32 degrees. Now that's useful around town as well, because think of all the car parks that have really steep ramps and how you can be worried about scraping. And obviously that goes in line with the use of the plastic all around the edges of the car, which is supposed to kind of eat any scratches and kind of mild damage without causing the car to look tatty. Now, I've had the chance to drive this car on a variety of different types of environment. I've been able to drive it on highway, I've been able to drive on A roads and around town. It seems to be pretty decent for all of those things. You'll also notice that it has quite a funky beat when you put the indicator on. I feel like this could be a really excellent house track. There's a lot of safety tech in this car as standard. You get lane departure warning and automatic emergency braking, which includes detections of cyclists and pedestrians. There's also traffic sign recognition and a drowsiness detection mode as well. You get basic cruise control as standard with the basic trim too. However, if you go up to the next level of trim, the altitude mode, that's upgraded to adaptive cruise control. And if you go to Summit, you get an even more capable cruise control that includes traffic stop and go and lane centering as well. Now, lane centering, that's not quite the same as autonomous driving, but this car does claim to have level 2 capabilities. So that's a useful cruise control. It means you can relax in something like an average speed zone or in a traffic jam and let the car kind of take over a little bit. You still have to very much remain in control and keep your eyes on the road and be ready to jump in if somebody does something stupid or there's a very emergency stop. But it takes some of the hassle off of driving in heavy traffic conditions. The Summit trim also adds blind spot detection and automatic main beams. As with all EVs, this is not a budget car. The base price is close to $36,000, and then if you go up to the altitude trim, that's $37,400, and it's close to $40,000 for the Summit trim. Now, that's not quite Tesla Model Y territory. You're going to need to spend another $5,000 at least to get a Model Y, but there is an options list that you can add on top of this, so you might be able to get it up to that level. And obviously this car can't compete with that level of car in terms of range or performance. although you might like the other attributes that it has, the ruggedness, the kind of the general look, the sense of occasion. This is also a smaller car, which makes it much more viable for city use than a lot of larger SUVs, because it's in a B SUV segment, so it's really just a kind of a high hatchback. Whether you like this car or not really does depend on your lifestyle, on whether you need and want that rugged capability, because for the same price as the base spec, you could get an MG4 extended range, and that will give you about 80 miles more range and a lot more performance as well. It's even got a boot that's about the same size. Compared to more expensive options like Teslas and other premium SUVs that are a bit bigger, and also similarly priced or cheaper options like the MG4, this car will obviously be able to take you down to the beach and along rugged woodland tracks much more easily. So that's the real question that you have to answer if you want to buy this car. Is that your lifestyle? Do you want to stick muddy bikes in the back of your vehicle? Do you want to go into woodland tracks and feel fairly confident that even though you don't have a full 4x4, you're going to be okay getting in and out? If you do, it's not such a bad choice. It's not exactly superb value, but it's not hideously expensive either. Certainly with Jeep's plan of entering a more urban, more European, smaller car market than it has been in before, this car does tick quite a few boxes. In terms of how the Jeep Avenger makes you feel, this car scores highly. It certainly gives the impression, both on the outside and on the inside, that you can take this car anywhere and knock it about a bit if you want to. Your kids will have more trouble braking this car than other vehicles too. But if you want a bit more value and less ruggedness, the MG options will give you that. And then of course there's the Renault Megane E-Tech, which gives you more range and speed for about the same kind of money. So it's great that Jeep's going electric, and as a first foray, this is pretty good. However, it's not quite the must-have EV in an increasingly competitive electric market. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel.